يا راغبا في كل علم نافع.
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية
زاد أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن، ومكارم الأخلاق ندرسها معا، أدب وتربية على الإحسان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. الحمد لله رب العالمين، والصلاة والسلام على أشرف المرسلين نبينا محمد وعلى آله وصحبه أجمعين. Continuing with Islamic education level 3 and the etiquettes to be observed. And this is such a beautiful topic that it's something that we should be occupied with all the time, because it's one's appearance, one's actions for repeated matters and actions. One of which is the adab and the manners and the etiquettes to be observed with regards to al-kalam or speech. And speaking, this is one of the favors of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and one of the things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala mentioned as a favor that was given to the human beings. Allamahu al-bayan. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala taught the human beings to express themselves. To be able to express yourself, this is a great favor from Allah. And many, almost the life of the human beings can never be established if they're all mute and not able to speak. So this is a great favor from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So therefore, there are etiquettes to be observed since it's from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and the revelation from Allah. So what is the way, the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ when it comes to this? Of course, there's halal and haram when it comes to speaking. There is haram things to be for a person to forbid himself from saying something that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade. And some of these etiquettes are, etiquettes-wise, not necessarily what's haram as far as the subject of the speech, is not to raise the voice when a person speaks unless he needs it. If a person is, you're talking to someone, talk in a level where it's sufficient for the person to hear. Don't scream. As Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, وَغْضُضْ مِنْ صَوْتِكَ إِنَّ أَنْكَرَ الْأَصْوَاتِ لَصَوْتُ الْحَمِيرِ. Lower your voice, because indeed the worst of the sounds is the sound of the donkeys. So what is the benefit of that? As Ibn Kathir rahimahullah said, أَيْ لَا تُبَالِغْ فِي الْكَلَامِ. Do not be extreme in the way that you speak. Do not raise your voice in which there's no benefit. Of course, if you're given khutbah, then you have to raise your voice, for example. So it's according to what is needed. To stay away from being extreme. Sometimes people, they are taught to speak in a way that is extreme in the way that they speak, to make themselves eloquent in their speech. So they would move their mouth in some weird way, or they would, all these types of things. It's against the norm or the ease that a person would speak at a certain way, that it's with ease. The Prophet ﷺ, he said, وَإِنَّ أَبْغَضَكُمْ إِلَيَّ وَأَبْعَدَكُمْ مِنِّي فِي الْآخِرَةِ. The most hated to me, the Prophet ﷺ is saying that, and those who are furthest away from me in the hereafter, أَسْوَأُكُمْ أَخْلَاقًا. The worst among you in manners. Good manners is a mandatory thing. And the closest ones to the Prophet ﷺ in the Day of Judgment are those who have those who have good manners. The closest to the Prophet ﷺ in the Day of Judgment, those who have good manners. And the opposite, those who are furthest away from him, is those who have bad manners. Then the Prophet ﷺ mentioned 3 words. He said, Al-mutashaddiqun, Al-mutafayhiqun, Al-thartharun. What is these 3 words here? Al-mutashaddiqun is those who they speak with their sides of their mouth, in which they would make their voice, I don't want to make myself look funny, but they move their mouth in such a way that as if they are showing arrogance, or being extreme in the way that they would express, the way that they would move their mouth. And al-mutafayhiqun, those who would speak in such an extended way, and they open their mouths too much. It's part of the same thing. And they be extreme in the way of the eloquency of speech. more than the norm of things. And the thartharun, those who would just speak too much without any benefit in speaking and repeating it over and over again. So this is part of bad manners. One of the etiquettes to be observed is to be staying away from this, to be at ease. And since whatever we speak is part of our actions, so really to know what we're saying so that we don't held responsible in an evil way for what we say. That's why one of the etiquettes is stay away from saying falsehood, lies, backbiting, explicit means of sins and things like this. The person would speak a word, as the Prophet ﷺ, he said, إن العبد لا يتكلم بالكلمة ما يتبين فيها يزل بها في النار أبعد ما بين المشرق والمغرب. That the slave of Allah would speak a word that he's not paying attention to what he's saying would make him fall into the hellfire as far more than what's between the east and the west. A word of mouth. A word of mouth take the person outside the fold of Islam. A word of mouth make him a Muslim. A word of mouth makes what's haram halal, marriage, contract, the ijab wal qabul, the offer and acceptance, word of mouth. So it's a very serious matter to be careful of what a person says. That's why the virtue of controlling one's tongue and one's speech from what is not benefiting, not just from what's not haram, but rather, or from what's haram, but rather to stay away from what if no benefit whatsoever. As the Prophet ﷺ, he said, and don't take these things based on your own desire. We have text to follow. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, من كان يؤمن بالله واليوم الآخر فليقل خيرا أو ليصمت. Whoever believes in Allah and the last day, so let him say what is good or to be silent. He did not say, let him say what is good or speak as long as it's not haram. No, if you don't know that it's good, then be silent. Just don't say things unless you know that this is a good reason for you to speak, and you would say things that is good for you to say. One of these etiquettes is to be at ease, to take your time speaking so that the people would understand. And the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he would speak, كان يحدث حديثا لو عده العاد لأحصاه. Someone would count the words that the Prophet ﷺ would say, he would count them. And whatever he would say something ﷺ, he would repeat it 3 times حتى تفهم عنه, so that people would comprehend it and understand it. So not in a way that is boring to the people, but to make sure that the words are understood and explained so the person would comprehend what is being said. One of these etiquettes, if there is benefit, worldly benefit hereafter, then speak. Otherwise, a person should be silent, as we heard. لا خير في كثير من نجواهم إلا من أمر بصدقة أو معروف أو إصلاح بين الناس. There's no goodness in many of the speech of people, except whoever commands for people to give sadaqah or matters of goodness known to be good among the people, rectifying disputes among people. And the Prophet ﷺ, when he took his tongue and he said to Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, كف عليك هذا, protect yourself from this, control that thing, do not make it against you. So the Mu'adh radiallahu anhu, he said, O Prophet of Allah, وَإِنَّا لَمُؤَاخَذُونَ بِمَا نَتَكَلَّمُ بِهِ, we will be held accountable for what we say. So the Prophet ﷺ, he said, ثَكِلَتْكَ أُمُّكَ يا معاذ وهل يكب الناس في النار على وجوههم أو على مناخرهم إلا حصائد ألسنتهم. That means, is it the people that are being thrown into the hellfire on their faces or on their nose anything more than the fact that what their tongues had harvested? That means that's the most common reason for people to be thrown into the hellfire, is what they say with their tongues. So this is a very serious matter. And that's why we have to observe what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants from us. We have to stay away from what Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forbade us. And that's part of the etiquettes. When a person thinks before he speaks. And as Imam Nawawi rahimahullah, when he talked about this matter, that before you speak, you have one of 3 things. You know for sure that this is good, then say it. You know for sure that this is good. You know for sure that this is bad, then you stay away from it, you don't say it. You're not sure if it's good or bad, then what's the ruling for it? You don't say anything, you're silent. So out of 3 situations, the only one that you speak is if you know for sure that this is good for you, as the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ. We'll stop here inshallah ta'ala, and continue with the same subject when it comes to the etiquettes of speaking by the will of Allah, by the mercy of Allah. صلى الله وسلم وبارك على محمد وعلى آله وصحبه وسلم. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.
يا راغبا في كل علم نافع
ينمو العلم ويتقدم بتقنياته ومجالاته، ومعه نطور أدواتنا في تقديم العلم الشرعي. أكاديمية
زاد أكاديمية ينبوعها صاف ليروي غلة الظمآن، ومكارم الأخلاق ندرسها معا، أدب وتربية على الإحسان. بشرى لنا زاد أكاديمية للعلم كالأزهار في البستان.